Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us today. We'll be going over how to fill out the budget narrative template. This template can be found on our LWCF and ORLP web pages. So you'll need to download the template off of our site in order to use it. So you'll go to Land and Water Conservation Fund, you'll go to Application Process, and then you'll scroll down a little bit to the Fillable Application Forms Budget Narrative. You'll click that and it'll automatically download. Be sure to save it to your local computer or somewhere where you can access it, and we'll take a look at that now. So here's the Excel template when you have it downloaded and open. There are typically 3 tabs on this spreadsheet: the Instructions tab, the Budget Narrative tab, and the Funding Sources tab. We'll be starting on the Detailed Budget Narrative tab. In our example, it says Sample. At the top of the spreadsheet, you'll be filling out the following information: your project name, your project number. If you've been assigned a 06-5-digit number, you can write that in here. You'll fill out the grant amount, usually come back at the end after you've filled out the budget narrative to fill this in. And then the project scope, if you've been given one, you can go ahead and fill that in. So there's instructions built into this spreadsheet, which is helpful. So these blue boxes here, as well as this kind of orange box that shows up under each section, you'll see them as we go through. Be sure to review these before you fill out the budget narrative. It'll help out a lot as you're going through it. So we're going to start with the columns. So column A, scope of work elements. It's a general description of what the line item is. B is number of units. We'll talk about that a little bit later. The cost per unit is column C, and then column D is an auto-calculated total line cost. So it's going to multiply the cost per unit times the number of units, and that's what'll show up in here. Columns E and F, E is the LWCF grant amount or federal share, and F is the match amount, the non-federal share. So you'll be taking the total line cost and divvying it up between these 2 columns. Some people do 50-50, some people split it up differently. You can fill it out how you'd like. And then column G is grant and match cost total. So column G and column D should actually match. If they don't, you might need to do some recalculating in columns E and F. Then we have column H, which is category subtotals. That will also auto-calculate. Then we have column I, pre-award planning cost. That's going to be where you're indicating the dollar amount for any pre-award planning costs related to your project. The total pre-award cost auto-calculates at the bottom of the sheet. This is only pertinent for programs like ORLP that are limited to max of 25% pre-award costs. Column J is milestones, month and year. Here's where you're going to be typing in the month and year of the expected completion date for that particular line item. These are estimates, so it's okay if they end up changing down the road. So column K is the percentage complete. You're going to be filling in the percentage of the line item that is complete. If this is your initial application, some or most of these lines are probably going to be 0, and that's okay. If you're already funded, you will be updating these percentages with each progress or status report over the life of the grant. Column L is basis of cost methodology for each line item. So how did your agency come up with this cost? Was it based on previous projects, maybe contractor estimates? You'll write in a brief description here. And then column M is the justification objective. So how does this line item contribute to the project? As you're getting ready to fill out your budget narrative, be sure to review the common ineligible costs for LWCF programs. That's shown on our website and also in the LWCF application guide. If you're unsure if a cost might be eligible or ineligible, you can also contact your project officer, and we're happy to help you out. So now we'll go ahead and go through each section, starting with 1, administrative and legal expenses. Here's that orange box that has some additional information on what costs go in each section, so be sure to reference that as you're going through this. If you need more lines, you can also insert more lines, and the formulas should automatically populate. So under section 1, which is administration and legal expenses, costs that typically go in this box include grant administration and project management. Costs that are not eligible for this category include grant writing. Section 2 is for acquisition projects only. It's land, structure, rights of way, and appraisal. Costs that typically go in this box include the cost of land. Costs that are not eligible in this category are acquisition support costs, appraisal costs, and appraised costs for buildings that will not be used for outdoor recreation. Section 3 is for acquisition projects only. It's relocation expenses. If you have costs that you believe would fall into this category, please contact your assigned project officer. Then Section 4 and 5 is architectural and engineering fees. Costs that typically go in this box include design costs, landscape architecture drawings, studies, surveying, mapping, designs, plans, and specifications. Section 6 is project inspection fees. So costs that typically go here include municipal inspection fees. Section 7 is site work and site prep. Costs that typically go in this box include grading, clearing, and grubbing. Section 8 is demolition and removal costs, and typically costs that go under this include demolition costs. Section 9 is construction. So in this section, you'll be listing each scope element with a brief description of what related items are grouped under that scope element. You do not need to list every detailed item that makes up the large scope items, and do not list the specific quantities of items being purchased in column B unless they are scope items where they will be appearing multiple times throughout the project. So a good example here is this park wants to put in shaded picnic areas that include gazebos, shade sails, picnic benches, barbecues, bike racks, and permanently affixed trash cans. So there's going to be 2 of these shaded picnic areas in the park. So they put 2 here and then the costs accordingly. Some other examples here is an artificial turf soccer field with lighting. So they want to put in 1 turf soccer field with associated lighting, and they have that written out. But then they also included things like an ages 5 to 12 playground with shade and lighting, and they have 1 of those in the park. Note that landscaping throughout the park, irrigation throughout the park, and lighting throughout the park should be separate lines. Utilities must be for ones that serve the park only, and be sure to specify that in the description for the line item. And then please separate each utility type out. So, for example, here we have park-specific water utility, park-specific electrical, and park-specific sewer, all in their own lines. Major support amenities such as restrooms or parking lots must be included as well. And there's an example here, restroom including water and electrical utility hookups, prefabricated building, and concrete pad. Costs that are not eligible in this category include bonding and anything that would fall off the park if you were to flip it upside down and shake it. So our last category here is contingency costs. You'll just list your contingency costs here. So at the bottom of the sheet, there is a set of formulas that auto-calculate as you fill in the budget narrative. These show the total federal share, the total match share, the total project cost, and the rate of reimbursement. If the rate of reimbursement appears to be really high or really low, make sure that the cell B4 at the very top of the page is filled in properly. This rate of reimbursement cannot be over 50%, so let's double check this. So total federal share here at the bottom is $1,115,000, and we'll go double check the grant amount at the top here. So $1,115,000, perfect, good to go. So go back down here. And then here's also that spot where it totals up your total pre-award costs. And depending on your grant program, sometimes this percentage cannot be over a certain amount. LWCF doesn't have a limit on what this percentage can be. So at the bottom of your budget narrative, you see there's multiple tabs. You'll go ahead and click the Funding Sources tab to bring up this page. The Funding Sources tab is where you'll be listing the non-LWCF funding sources that will cash flow 100% of your total project costs. So let's start at the beginning here. Column A is the name of the funding source. Maybe it's another grant or a general fund. If it has an acronym, please spell out the acronym. Column B is the match amount and value, so it's the amount of the funding source. The total project cost at the bottom of this column needs to match the total project cost at the bottom of the budget narrative tab that we looked at previously. Column C is the source. Be sure to list where the funding is coming from. Maybe it's local, state, private, or federal. Keep in mind that most federal funding sources are generally not allowed. If you have federal funds that you think are eligible for use on your project, contact your project officer and we'll verify that. Column D is the type. What kind of funding is this source? Is it cash, Is it donations? Is it volunteer time? And then column E is date secured. Note that this date must be before the application deadline. So with that, that's the end of the budget narrative. We hope this video was helpful. If you have any additional questions, please reach out to your assigned project officer or LWCF at parks.ca.gov if you have any questions.